Hey everybody! Alright. So it's gonna like build an audience, so we'll just like wait for, if you want to sit wherever you're comfortable, and then we'll. Awesome. How's that?
Great.
Cool.
Feel free to get as close as you want to get.
Cool. We have so what's great is we can see how many viewers there are. I know this is so weird.
Yeah.
This is probably pretty good. I'll grab a pillow.
So,
Awesome. Hey everybody. Welcome to like our second interview in one day with Hive Live. I know you can barely see me. You can tell that I'm working out the whole sideways vertical thing. Being very humbled by technology. I'm super excited. I'm here still in Western Mass with Jacoby Ballard. I'm in Amherst now. Day one of launching the Hive directory and traveling around and meeting what I feel like are some of the most inspirational practitioners out there. So I want to thank you for being on Hive Live.
yeah, thanks, Sage.
It's so good to see you.
Really good to see you. It's been some years.
It's been some years. Yeah, Jacoby and I met at the United States Social Forum in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
We were part of a very special space called the Healing Justice Space, offering different modalities within a sort of social political conference.
Yeah.
So it was such a treat to be there, such an honor.
Yeah.
So Jacoby is, I'll let Jacoby talk about, you didn't do pronouns.
He, him.
Yeah, he, him, yeah. She, his, they for me. Yoga teacher trainer, founder of an amazing cooperative wellness center in New York, in Brooklyn, called Third Root, and has been doing some phenomenal social justice work within the mainstream yoga community. So tonight we're going to ask some questions. We're going to talk about what Jacoby's excited about. We're going to talk about what you think folks need to be paying attention to. And, we'll start with maybe just giving us a little snapshot of your life. Whatever you feel like. I know, just a little question. Just give us like a little, like, what do you do? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
That's a great look.
I was born and raised in Colorado. I grew up in a small rural town in the mountains of Colorado, which immediately connected me to the earth. And in a small town like that, what we do to socialize was to like go outside, go hiking, go fishing, build campfires, and so had that immediate connection and kind of like sense of like belonging to something that like is like so much greater than like even humanity. And especially to be on like enormous mountains looking out in an expanse, I feel like had a sense of built me a sense of both like the individual and the collective right away.
That's beautiful. That's so cool with the mountains.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and I love to like be up high. When my partner and I in Brooklyn, like 5 years ago, moved into a new place together. We moved into the 6th floor, and she was like, "You love that it's on the 6th. This is your mountain, right?" It is. I can see everything. It's great.
That's so great. Right, you like find it wherever you go. Yeah, totally. That's awesome.
And then it was a really hard town to grow up in, though. It was outside of Aspen and was like the working class town supplying the workforce for this really wealthy ski industry. And so there was that, and then there's also like a lot of racial tension in our town. There's a very stark divide between Latino folks and white folks. And saw like really grave incidences of racial violence in my school, in my town, and it was also like pretty conservative politically, and then also in terms of like gender and sexuality. I don't recall meeting a single queer person. I don't think. There's one boy who actually killed himself when we were in 9th grade that I like think it's because he was queer and had no one else. So growing up there, and also being bullied, I went all the way across the country to Maine for college.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
COA?
No, I wish. Colby College.
Oh, Colby. All
Yeah.
right on.
Yeah, and that like getting away was so useful too, to like really find myself. And since then, I've like at Colby, I started actually in high school. I started a meditation practice, and it helped me survive bullying really, because it allowed me to turn inward. And then at Colby, we had a wellness credit that we had to take, and I procrastinated on it. It's like no wellness. And then the registrar emailed me and was like, now you have to do yoga. Like that was the last option.
To.
Yeah.
Oh my god, no, great. You've avoided it.
Totally.
That's amazing.
And I was like, okay, I'll do yoga.
Wow.
And it was with this 70-year-old woman named Lillian McMullen, and I feel really grateful for having like stepped into this like physical practice in the presence of this elder woman, because it just like changes. It's different than like learning yoga from like a 20-year-old, which is so common, especially right now in yoga in the U.S. And so her practice was so much deeper than the physical, but also what she could do physically was so much more than what I could do in my 20-year-old body. So that was compelling. And at the same time, I was getting involved in social justice stuff on campus and more national networks of like student organizing and stuff. And so for a long time, those paths kind of ran parallel, but didn't really intersect. There was a lot of judgment from each. Like within yoga and meditation, it felt like if I would bring up like social justice or oppression and privilege dynamics, then it would be like detracting from the like spiritual vibe, or the like, aren't we all one though? Like, why are you bringing us down? And then within social justice, if I was like, you know, I have to do my yoga practice and then I can come to a meeting, and then they'd be like, look at you, aren't you indulgent? Like,
right.
What does your yoga practice matter? Like, there's people dying,
right?
Which, I mean, I think for probably most of the people you're interviewing, like, have to toggle with that as well, of like how to balance justice and self-care.
Yeah, not only people who I'm interviewing, but the people who I'm interviewing who you work with.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And how to cultivate a living, breathing value system that encompasses all of it in a way that feels deeply okay. Right?
Yeah.
And like in a good conscience, in a good way.
Right. And sustainable in both realms, with both like, we can't do justice work without like serving ourselves and nourishing ourselves. And we also can't just nourish ourselves, or else like then we'll become really isolated and separate from the rest of the world and what's going on, and irrelevant, really. Absolutely.
Right, and that brings us to so much of what your work more currently in the past bunch of years has been about.
Yeah, so I started Third Root Community Health Center in 2008 in Brooklyn. Met my colleague Green Whalen Llewellyn at a herbal conference, actually, that Angel was at.
Oh, super sweet.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff happens at conferences.
I know, right?
Don't we know it? I know you guys know it too.
And Green was a massage therapist and an acupuncturist, and I was a herbalist and a yoga teacher, and we were like, there's something, so I think we're good for each other. And then we started talking and kind of built out from there, and she reached out and found a few more acupuncturists that wanted to do what we wanted to do, and I found another yoga teacher, and from the inception of the idea, probably that October, to like opening our doors at Third Root in the next August, so it was like 10 months.
Wow,
and
that's
that was
pretty
like,
quick.
Yeah, and that was like the business plan, and that was renovating our space, and that was, you know, gathering enough funding to like be able to like get up and run, you know, without a lot of income coming in immediately. So yeah,
10 months.
It was a lot all at once that I look back and I'm like, what were we thinking? Like in Brooklyn too, in 2008, when the crash had just happened.
Right.
But that was actually really timely because a lot of people that couldn't afford their acupuncture in Manhattan or their private yoga class or whatever, then could like found another space to continue those practices. And then also just because of who we were, which is really intentionally built, with fat folks and disabled people and people of color and low income people and queer people and trans people and women and men, and just kind of as many identities as we could, pretty intentionally, but also not tokenizing, recognizing that there's like people with skills and also these different identities that were not always lifted up. So because we were who we were, then people would step through the door because they wanted to see Julia, a fellow black woman, to get acupuncture because they'd never gotten acupuncture and wanted someone who, like, I don't know, they felt some safety with,
Absolutely, I do know. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
And if you were just in a nutshell, like Third Root is a yoga studio. It's a collective of healers.
It's a worker-owned cooperative.
Yep.
And there's a yoga program within it.
Yep.
I hesitate to call it a yoga studio
Yeah,
just
no,
because of
I
everything
as
that goes along with
as I heard myself say that, I was like, rewind the tape.
Totally.
All right, I'm with
That'll
you.
scare a lot of our people away.
Of course, totally. Yeah, no, I don't know why I said it.
And so there's acupuncture, there's massage, there's a herbal medicine program, and a Buddhist studies program now.
Beautiful.
And all of it kind of around a centering nexus of social justice, both practicing justice with like how we interact with every single individual that comes in and each other, and owning a business together across all these different identities brings up a lot. And then also working with different social movement organizations to like ensure that they're nourished and vibrant to be able to do the important work that they do.
So you go into organizations to support sort of thoughtful wellness within their context of their work.
Yeah, or have them come to us for like a staff retreat.
Oh, cool.
Which is really fun to do too.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and then my partner is a professor, and she got a job in upstate New York, so we left Brooklyn in 2014.
Okay.
And so I left Third Root, which I think was really useful for me and for Third Root, because for lots of organizations, if a founder stays somewhere too long, then it becomes about them, it becomes about the ego, and not about what the overarching organization is there to do. And it also, I think, doesn't allow a lot of the other people with a lot of other skills to really step up and step into their own. And for me, it like kind of like kicked me out of the safe place that I had built up around me, and kind of pushed me out into the rest of the like yoga world and Buddhist world. Which I wouldn't have been ready to do in 2008, but now having this having built what I had dreamed of, like it felt the strength to be able to like go out into these like pretty sometimes scary places.
Absolutely. And Third Root is still running.
They're still running. They're
still running.
Awesome.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's not always how it works.
I know.
So it's such a great sign of the people who are running it, and the infrastructure that you all put in place. Yeah. And also the need for it.
Right. Yeah. I'm so proud of them, and anyone from Third Root that's out there. So
look at all the hearts. It's so cute. They're like popping up. That's so awesome. Your people.
Yeah. Hey.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. So, anything else you want to say about that? I'm going to ask you another question. So now you live in Western Mass.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like following my partner, and she hasn't gotten a tenure-track job yet. So wherever we land, So we spent 2 years in upstate New York. Now we're in Western Mass. Who knows what we'll be next? This is probably not the forever place.
Great. So what are you doing while you're here?
Yeah, teaching yoga.
Teaching yoga.
Starting a yoga teacher training program in a couple of weeks. which I've never done. I've been teaching yoga for 18 years now. And people for like probably the last 10 years have like been asking me like, when are you going to run your own training?
So this is your own teacher training.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's why you were like, I'm real busy right now.
Yeah, totally. I had a lot to do.
Putting it together.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And it was really the right moment. I thought of doing it before within different combinations of people. I never wanted to do it by myself. I'm not really a do it by yourself kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And found the right colleague here who also has a social justice lens, and
Mm-hmm.
we share a lot of commitments and a lot of critiques,
Mm-hmm.
and different kind of like anyone I've ever collaborated with. Our skill sets just match up to
Mm-hmm.
really even each other out.
That's so exciting. What's the teacher training called? Like if somebody wanted to find out about it.
It's called Adhikara Yoga Teacher Training, or Adhikara Yoga School. And it's with my friend Molly Kitchen and I.
Great.
And we have some great faculty coming in, the founder of the Black Yoga Teachers Alliance, and Nisha Ahuja, who's up in Toronto doing some great work teaching yoga, and she's an Ayurvedic practitioner and social justice worker and theater worker. And then also my colleague Emily from Third Root is coming up to teach anatomy.
Oh, great.
Which I'm really excited about, to
Yeah.
have that connection.
That's so wonderful. Again,
Yeah.
like a collective community offering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how many hours is it?
It's a 200-hour training, which is what's required by the Yoga Alliance to be able to teach yoga, which I actually have a lot of critique of that model. It kind of like spits people out, yoga teachers out into the world really quickly. And so we look around yoga, and if you like go to whatever town you're traveling to, go to Durham, and you're like, look up a yoga class, you don't really know what you're going to get unless you really know the person and really know how to validate someone's teaching and someone's like practice and experience. So a lot of people have been practicing yoga for just a couple years, and then they want to deepen their practice, and they take a teacher training, and then they're legally able to teach this really vast body of knowledge. And I think it's like that model is not really fair to the person that becomes a teacher or to the tradition of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see it be like more of like a acupuncture school model or med school model, where it's like a couple of years, and this is like you're not doing anything else. That's you're studying.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that honors the lineage of yoga.
Yeah.
And it honors the teacher and it honors the student.
Right.
And obviously people get something really different from a teacher who has sort of been apprenticing and in an intensive for a couple of years than for a week or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who's really been practicing themselves, and who doesn't want to be a teacher. Them teaching yoga is not about them.
Yeah.
It is like about holding space and ushering people into their full potential or full being.
Yep. So having been in a deep journey on their own with their own practice, being and sort of having those evolutions to getting to a place where there's a strength in when you're teaching, it's almost like your own journey has sort of led you to a place where it's like so not about you in this way, because you've been doing the work all along for a period of time. Right.
But given that this model does exist and it's spitting people out, I don't even know if there's a count on how many yoga teachers there are in the U.S. or around the world right now, but there's a lot.
There's a lot, yeah.
And there's a lot of things that most yoga schools are not training in. They're not training in trauma. They're not examining social justice in the way of like, what does it mean to be a white teacher offering this lineage that comes from India and Africa to largely a group of white people. They don't talk about it.
Yep. Yep.
Or like, how does gender come up in the classroom, and like, what are ways that you can embrace genderqueer and trans people? They don't talk about it.
Right.
So I'm excited to kind of like get in on, since this is already existing, to like put more skilled teachers out into the world who at least have the like basis to like ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And the resources where they know where to turn when like they don't have the knowledge.
Yeah. And if there are yoga teachers watching right now, which I'm sure there are now or will be, who are, you know, like even like I went through a 2-week training and you know, like started teaching. I mean, I actually taught before I did a training. I started teaching in my trans community because I was taking yoga. I was seeing that it was really helpful for me.
Yep.
And a lot of my trans brothers were having back issues because of the binders. And they were like, will you just, so that, you know, and I was like, sure. And I had my little office space where I had my massage practice. This was in, you know, 2009, and you know, it was like 4 of us, and we just stretched. So, you know, I kind of called it stretching. You know, it was like, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. You know, people kind of like yoga because it's like this thing, but so, you know, I think we all come to yoga in different ways, and it's so amazing how many people are so inspired to teach it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
And so called, right? Like they're having so much benefit and they want to give that benefit. So if you were to just to pause on this point of all the people out there, which is millions really, who have gone through these 2-week trainings and who are like still kind of like yoga, justice, like what's the
connection? Yeah,
like, you know, what's one resource or one thing, question, you know, like what's one, I mean, obviously there's a million, but like, and this is part of what your training is about and part of what your work's been about and part of what so many people's work has been about. Yeah. But like, what's one place to start?
I don't know if I can name just one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's kind of a silly way to put it.
But I would name the Black Yoga Teachers Association. Doing really important work. There's not a lot of Black yoga teachers in the country. Most teachers are like the only one in their training, and so they hold an annual conference and they have a Facebook page and they have they're growing a broader and broader base of support, which is just really beautiful to see, and that's actually being embraced by mainstream yoga. And then I think Off the Mat Into the World is doing really great work too. They work with everyone from like those inspired yoga practitioners who want to become teachers who don't really know what they're taking on, but like, you know, out of the generosity of their heart want to offer up what they've gained so much from. And then they also work with like social justice leaders, and people come to them to be trained in trauma, and so I think their trainings right now are some of the best that I know. And then there's a organization that I started with 12 other people of yoga teachers and facilitators called Bending Towards Justice. Cool. And we do diversity trainings for yoga teachers. So we either do it in yoga teacher trainings where we go in and do a 4 or 8 or 12 hour training within the broader 200-hour training. Or we've worked with yoga studios where the studio owner sees a value in these skills or like a need for it. There's a studio in Harlem that was like, we're a yoga studio in Harlem. We need to talk about racial justice. So had us come in, and we've actually come and done a few trainings with them.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Right, because so many people are like, we know it's not quite right.
Right, there's something
we know
missing.
We need something a little, like, you know, and it's so exciting that there's a group now of 12 people who are, you guys are cultivating this curriculum to be able to go and integrate this consciousness, this lens, and these practices into yoga studios. Yeah. Bending towards justice. Bending towards justice. That's awesome. You guys are on the web. Yep. Great.
Yep. And we want to be, we've offered the training as like a kind of open training at different yoga studios where people can show up for. We did that at Yoga Works in San Francisco and in New York at a couple of studios. And what we found was that, you know, then we were really preaching to the choir. Right. But if we do it within the body, within the structure of a yoga teacher training, or for all of the existing yoga teachers of a studio, then people have to take it. Right. And they don't really get to choose it. And that's actually part of what keeps me in yoga right now, is like the vast potential to organize these 10 million practitioners. Right. That feel, you know, called by, yes, the movements, but also the practices of nonviolence and kindness and truthfulness and integrity and not stealing and self-study, to mobilize that towards social change. Like, that's a 10 million constituency of yogis that like, I think largely like stay out of things or try to like just be nice or like not get into things that are too sticky. But more and more, I think both because, you know, people in social justice feel like burned out and they need more skills or more resource or more nourishment, go and take a yoga teacher training or become a nurse or become an acupuncturist.
Right.
And also, those of us who have been in it and are like growing our bodies of work and also working with each other and catching a lot of people in that, you know, that collaboration. It's really exciting to see yoga change and become more challenging. And there's an organization called Yoga Votes that's popped up a couple years ago to like organize yogis just to vote, like just make sure you vote, and like to have like ballot sign up or voter registration at yoga studios. That's
so great.
There's like things like so that, cool. You know, that are like small but like important.
Right.
And if like those 10 million people voted, then like that could sway any given election.
That's right. That's yeah. And it's, you know, it's when you said sort of like sometimes the, you know, the tendency maybe in mainstream yogis is to like not get political or not get into the sticky stuff. And then, but what I find is that so many of those people come to yoga because of the sticky stuff in their life. They're going through like a terrible breakup, or a parent has died, or something almost so much that they can't deal with on their own. And like a physical, spiritual practice that's rooted in these phenomenal like lineages and values offers something so relieving. Yeah. You know, and so, and really on some level, it's like taking that sort of personal experience and all we're just saying is applying it to the collective. Yeah. Right? Like the we. Yeah. Right? The sticky stuff and the we. Right.
And I think that's also like a huge misstep or missed opportunity for yoga studios and yoga teacher trainings is because that's trauma, right? Like that people are coming in with. They're that's like, the world is unbearable. I need something. I need a tool. I need some respite. And so they come to yoga or they come to acupuncture, massage, whatever it is, to dance. And if we don't talk about trauma within those spaces or within those trainings, then that person feels that they're broken or they're fucked up. And then there creates an isolation, right? Which is like further embeds their trauma and the harm. There's like the initial harm, and then there's like the separation of feeling like the only one that's like had a loved one die, or the only one who's had your brother shot, or whatever. And if we don't talk about that within the whole collective body, whether that's, you know, 4 people or 20 or 1,000, then there's like so much connection that's missed. But if we make that like not just that one person's struggle with death, or not just that one person's breakup, but like that's a universal human experience that we're all going through, and that actually, if that's happening for you, that's also happening for me, because we're interdependent. Yep. That's when we can really like, we can find connection with each other, and then through that connection and relationship, which is like, maybe you're really different from me, maybe you come from a really different background, maybe, you know, that person, maybe you're from like Nebraska and a like evangelical family, and I'm like some trans guy from Brooklyn, but like we find this connection, that relationship is healing. Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to change like everything that's happening in our political landscape right now. Yeah.
Yeah, like just thinking about that Matt next to Matt. Yeah. And like the opportunity of being with each other in that way. And the role of the yoga studio and the role of the yoga teacher to create those conditions where that can be a little bit more harnessed, where it can be a little bit more opened, where it can be a little bit more voiced, you know, or a lot more at times.
Which takes a lot of training for that teacher, for that person to really hold space and not recognize when they're being, like, I am held by a number of teachers who I can turn to when I'm being triggered, and who or people that I'm accountable to that can be like, you know, Jacoby, you really messed up with this thing, and these are the things you need to do to like make things all right again. I need that, or else I'm not going to be hold as much space as I potentially could. And if I don't study, if I don't meditate, if I don't practice on my own, then I'm not going to be there for people. And if I don't study for years, like I can't imagine, I started teaching in 2000 at my college, and people came to me who were struggling in college, or people who were staff members at the college getting a hysterectomy, or dealing with a teenager who's struggling with depression, or whatever it may be. I can't imagine, like, I look back and I'm like, thank God I didn't hurt them. Or maybe I just didn't hear about it, but like, I just like stepped in without any training and like taught yoga, and they were coming, people with like hurt were coming to me to find healing. Like, thank God I didn't, at least in some obvious grave way, hurt them. Yeah. I wish, I don't regret any part of my journey, but like, I would take it maybe slower than to like, or to like really, to have someone, it was also the moment it was in yoga where you didn't have to be certified to teach. In 2000. There wasn't, the Yoga Alliance was just getting their stuff together. It's a lot different to come to like someone like Lillian, who I learned from, who's, who had been practicing for 20 years, whose total life had like turned upside down, and who could hold anyone else's life turning upside down because she made it through.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I kind of like to think about that as like there was an earnestness, there was an innocence, there was a desire to offer something, right? And there's also the intelligence that's sort of infused in the teaching of yoga that is so much bigger than all of us. So on some level, the medicine that you were, or the offering was there in 2000, right? It just really differently because it didn't have all these like amazing layers of capacity and lens. But I think if our integrity is intact to a certain degree, and we're offering something, it's like often there's a transmission, and there can be. People will come if there's that, And then I think what's so exciting now is that we're starting to ask how, it's kind of like, okay, on a base level, it's okay, maybe not. Like, we could debate that for a while. But, like, what else can we do, right? Like, what other lenses and what other conditions can we put into trainings and we can put into yoga studios that can actually really deeply harness healing, right? And create connectivity amidst the class, connectivity to self and connectivity to other and connectivity to spirit or whatever. And those things are really often the nuances of time and apprenticing and good teaching and good mentors and things like that. So it's such a evolution or something. But on some level, I do think that what we're also talking about is like having some more baseline education and training, even in the 200 hours. Oh yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So, and what can that be like, and what can that look like? But I wanna go. So when I asked you kind of what was like really present for you right now, is you said healing and trauma and social justice, and so I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to see if everybody can hear us. Love this is great. Good. Thanks for the feedback, everybody. Seems like you can hear us. That's great. Working it out with my tech person. Oh, sweet. You see the little pop-ups. So cute.
Love that.
So we're going to talk a little bit about trauma and healing and social justice now, and what you're thinking about, what you're feeling.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like you were saying with the, like, why people come to yoga, I think that's also why people go to social justice, which is because we see chaos in our own lives, or because we want change, or because we see our loved ones getting hurt, or the land that we care about being mined, or, something heartbreaking. And for a lot of us, like, we're really deep in that thing. Like, yeah, I mean, like, for me, being like bullied in high school, you know?
Well, I was going to say not only heartbreaking, but literally threatening your livelihood, your family safety, your land. Can you stay here in this country? Can you not? Like very real threatening things that put the nervous system in a vigilant state.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think social justice movements have taken it up in the last, like, really the last 5 years, but maybe the last 10 years to, like, talk more and work more around trauma. To, like, recognize that, like, well, within Buddhism, and I teach Buddhism as well, there's a adage that hurt people, right? And so when I think about our movements, I see a lot of fractioning. I see a lot of like calling out. I see a lot of I don't know, like disrespect or not trusting each other's best intentions, or and there's lots of beauty also within our social movements for sure. But I think some of that like shadow side is because it's unresolved trauma. That like if my friend Lisa Garrett in New York says that if we have an unhealthy individual, then we're gonna have an unhealthy organization, we're gonna have an unhealthy community, and then we're gonna have an unhealthy world. But if we have a healthy individual, and that builds a healthy organization, and it builds out from there. And I think also the role of this like distaste for spirituality within social justice work that's like starting to fade out, I think, or at least in what I listen to and read, but it's still there. I think that's like done some damage where people like then that builds the model of the martyr within social justice, that you just like go and go and go until you're broken,
right,
and can't get up out of your house, can't get up out of bed because you're heartbroken, whatever it is.
Right, and if you're not doing that, then you're maybe not doing it right.
Yeah,
or like,
yeah, a lot of judgment around it too.
Yeah.
But if we weave together our own healing and social justice, that so many organizations like Fierce and like Audre Lorde Project and like Generative Somatics, so many, the Highlander Center are starting to do. It just makes our organization so much more powerful because we know where each other's come from in order to be in this office or meeting or wherever we are, protest. And we can also like anticipate each other's triggers. We've had that conversation, or those many conversations, right? And so then we can support each other in a different way. And then our movements are like so much more connected within the organization, and then within whatever we're challenging, that we're like less breakable.
Yeah, because we're so much more able to hold ourselves and help hold each other with the triggers.
Yeah.
Right. With some of the pain, with some of the suffering that people are enduring.
Yeah.
Like it's a little bit more out there, and that there's tools and there's capacities for support and even love, right? Like to be able to come into the cracks of so much intensity, the intensity of social justice work, you know, and love in a sense, or care in a sense that's felt, right? And that sort of bolstering so much, and then obviously that can be, like you said, you're stronger for it. Yeah.
And it takes away a lot of the stigma of what a lot of us have gone through, whether it's childhood sexual abuse or addiction, or, you know, poverty, or, you know, being discriminated against in any number of ways, excluded from a lot of institutions, and not offered possibilities that other people are offered. If we talk about it, and there's scientific studies about this actually, that if we share our deepest traumas, if you and I talk about it, then we're both holding it, right? And so there's less weight on either one of us. We're holding it together, and then it also becomes less of a secret.
Yeah.
It's like, Yeah, I have alcoholism in my family.
Yeah.
And actually that's probably 2/3 of our society. And
Right.
we can talk about it openly, and it's not that my family's wrong or bad, or that your family's wrong or bad.
Yeah.
But that's like a fact of where we come from.
Right. And then shame starts to reduce,
Mm-hmm.
right, which plays into a nervous system that's on all the time,
Right.
right? So when we reduce shame,
Mm-hmm.
we normalize adaptive behaviors, or
Right.
like
Yeah.
you know, risky behaviors, or
Right.
like that's just people surviving these things that they've gone through, right?
Yeah.
And then again the shame goes down,
Yeah.
and the quality of being able to feel like you're okay
Mm-hmm.
goes up,
Totally.
right? And that's what we want to do, is we want to create conditions and organizations where like your history, like, you know, on some level, whatever your traumatic history is, or whatever your cultural, you know, like traumas have been, that there's a understanding of that context,
Mm-hmm.
and where it's not a deficit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's a like, and it doesn't have to be like a badge either. It's
Right.
just is what it is, like,
Yeah.
you know, and that it's a part of it's just like a part of the threads that make us up.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, empathy and compassion and all sorts of good things come
Right.
from that quality of sharing.
Yep. One of my off the mat into the world, and especially my teacher Sean Corn often says that our greatest wound is our greatest gift, because that's whatever has really touched our hearts and our souls. And so then if we can connect to each other on that basis, then I could really work with someone on bullying because I've gone through it, or inform policies on bullying or whatever. So to like take that, whatever that shadow is, and to offer it out, I think is like, takes so much courage, but is also such a gift. So when I work with someone like students and trainees and even colleagues, when people say that they're broken, it's really like that's actually an asset that you have to like understand the world, and to understand harm, to understand suffering, and that if that's happened to you, then you know what it's like to be put down. You know what shame is like. You know what guilt is like. You know what it's like to be isolated for that thing that wasn't your fault. And so you wouldn't dare do that to anyone else.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm thinking also about my friend Hala Corey talks about being resourced, which she talks about as like being in present time and in our bodies and in present space with each other, and that like when we're triggered, we leave that, or if we're triggered and we don't have a resource, if we're like not with our breath, or not with our body, or not able to like look around and remember that we're here on this day, and it's not 20 years ago or 2 years ago, whatever the thing happened, then that allows the trigger to reduce over time. And this, you know, there's like this conversation that I hear about a lot from my partner, because she's a professor on a college campus, around trigger warnings. And I think that especially how her students interpret it is that anything with like sexual violence in a film, say, that she's going to show should not be shown, or yeah, whatever it is, you know, like histories of slavery, histories of genocide, where like people in the class, like that's their people, and that, you know, they or their ancestors went through whatever. I think the conversation is that like it just shouldn't be shown, or there should be so much warning so that like a trigger should never happen. But that's actually not possible with trauma. They're like, we're going to be triggered, and like we can't. That's like trying to control our environments, and we're not in control. So we're going to be triggered. And so what I've learned through trauma is that it's less about eliminating triggers and more about resourcing ourselves, so that when we meet a trigger, then we're resilient. That it's like everything's still okay. Like this thing reminds me of my sexual trauma when I was 6, and I'm not there. I'm okay.
Yeah, that's right. Or there's a wobble, Right. Like it's not a wobble that takes you out.
Right.
Right. Like there can be a wobble, and you're like, oh, my body. I'm noticing.
Right. I'm having some response.
Right. I'm noticing because it is triggering.
Right.
But I can stay present with that thing that's happening in my body, and there's at least enough of me that can stay present in this moment to know that I'm gonna probably have a little bit of a cycle with it. But I'm not gonna leave my body or leave totally, right? Because it's like I've found as a, with the trauma work is like, it's building that capacity little by little to stay more and more and more, right? It's like almost like a spectrum of building that, with triggers.
Right.
Yeah.
And in our social justice work, we're gonna face so many triggers.
Yeah.
And so if we're not resourced, then we're going to be taken out, and then our movements are going to peter out or self-destruct, right? Like turn on each other. But if we can, meet some of these like comments or the cabinet that's being put in place right now, and some of what their dialogue is, if we can meet that with like breath and embodiment and being in present time and space, then that means that like where so much further harm can happen when we're dissociating, when we leave the present time and space. And if we stay there and have tools and feel strong, then and know that like that we're actually okay in this moment, then we can act with so much more determination and be really deliberate and intentional and strategic, and not just like react, and then potentially put ourselves in further danger.
Absolutely. I think that's such an amazing intention to hold, particularly in this moment, right now.
Yeah.
And it's messy.
It's really
like some days you can do it, and some days you can't. And that's just also part of the practice too, right?
Yeah.
Is building that capacity to stay with breath and to meet, what's terrifying with strength, and some days like putting your head over, going under the covers and there's a difference between disconnecting and disassociating, right? And sometimes just, unplugging and going and resting and disconnecting is a really, really great strategy, right? And I think we all have, it's self-care, and we all have different ways for dealing. There's just so much to, and this is part of what we can help each other with, is like learning about how, like, sharing a little bit with you about like how when I'm triggered, this is what happens, right? So you can help me, you can notice,
oh, that thing's happening,
right? and then I'm going to tell you how I need you to tell me that thing's happening, so I don't like go way more, right? But like just the opportunity of relationship to support that quality of staying present, connecting. We can be each other's resources. We want to build those in ourselves, build those in our circles. Sorry, I just realized you guys can't see me. So I'm really happy that you talked about the resource piece.
There's another thing on that I want to add on that's been really nourishing for me in the last year. Is there's a Buddhist teacher named Bonnie Doran out of Seattle, who she talks about with any of these things, any of the traumas that we might have, as being in fellowship or any of our life experiences. So like I'm in a fellowship of survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And so it's not just about me, but there's like a lot of us. Or there's fellowships, right?
I'm in a fellowship of adoptees.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not like something that's wrong or bad.
Right.
But it's just like there's a lot of people going through this, and it's a human experience. And some human experiences, like survivors of gun violence, like I would like to live into the day where there's not survivors of gun violence, but for the time being, there is, and if we can find community, and then that's so healing in itself around that thing. And I think in one of your questions you had asked about like a transformative moment, and one that I found just like that really. I provided this space and I didn't even really like know how impactful it would be until after it had happened and I heard back from the people. So I was teaching an herbal education class, and there were 12-week classes, and one had just ended and another was about to begin. And one of the students had disclosed to me part of the program was to work one-on-one with the two of us teachers and have a health consultation and be working on your own health as you take this class in health, which I realize is not how medical schools work, but I think it would be good for everyone.
Seems like a really good one.
And so I had known from this previous class that there was someone who was on psych meds and was like transitioning between a few and felt a lot of shame about it, and also just like overwhelmed, and like she was becoming an herbalist and felt a lot of shame about like, well, shouldn't I just rely on the plants? Like, am I just like, is there something mentally wrong with me because the plants can't fix me? And she had been working with this, and we had been working with various herbs and also with the meds, and you know, being cautious, but also like experimenting, seeing what we could do for some, to allow her to feel right. And then there was another student who came in and had a health consultation early within like the first couple weeks of the class, and it was similar for him, and he was like struggling with like which meds to go on or how to transition off and all those things. And so I asked them both first, you know, there's someone that's in a really similar position to you. Could I put them in touch? And they both said yes. And then they got to talk about their, you know, path through the mental health system, which like one of them had been institutionalized, the other one had not, but had been threatened with that. They'd been on and off of some of the same drugs, and you know, some of the doctors had said some of the same painful things to each of them. And it was so useful for them to just just be able to talk with someone who's going through the same thing. And, you know, not exactly the same thing, and they're different people, but like, they really hold the same values. They want to be as natural as possible, and there could be a chemical imbalance that like the plants actually can't address. And I think like from that moment forward, I was like, oh, like that has to be like an intention in our healing work, is to connect people who are going through the same things.
Absolutely. Yeah, the power of that reduces isolation.
Yes.
And that sense of that you're the only one, or
Yeah.
that it just how so much trauma or mental illness or otherness works is part of how it works in this, you know, the conditions that we live in, is that it just, you know, it has all this taboo that gets sort of linked to it, and then it just works our psyche. It just, we just keep those beliefs about us being wrong or not enough, or you know, and then the shame. So literally connecting with somebody else who has the same, even if it's like the same shitty story,
right?
It's like, what a relief that is, right?
It's so healing.
It's so healing. Yeah. So just another great reason for yoga studios and other places to look for ways to be able to cultivate that type of, you know, even informal connectivity.
Yep.
Among practitioners or in whatever venues, you know, y'all work in.
Yep.
Because the potency of that type of medicine, first of all, it's free.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I think also the struggle to like navigate the systems of mental health. Or I was also just thinking about, I taught Buddhism in a prison in upstate New York last year, and probably half of the guys were fathers. And you know, some of them, their custody was being challenged because they were incarcerated and charged with, you know, not being present enough for their kids or whatever. And some of them had their custody taken away, and some of them had been like in the foster care system themselves. And just having this, like, building this connection through the class, where they would be able to talk about these experiences, and to offer each other resources, like, hey, actually, you got to talk to this person in the prison, or you know, there's this mental health person, like, don't go to them, but go to this other person, because that person's going to put you on like meds that are going to just like put you down, and this other person actually cares about you. It built so much connection, like across race, and it was just like so beautiful. We did this activity that Kelly McGonigal talks about in her book, The Upside of Stress, where everyone writes down a great suffering they faced in their life, and then they fold it in a paper, and then they give it all to me, and we mix it up, and then they take another one out, and they read it. And at first, I just have them sit with it, and I'm like, I give them an instruction. They've been meditating. They've been like building mindfulness for several weeks at this point. And I tell them, you know, you're holding someone's great wound, and so hold it with respect. This is sacred. And so they sit with it. You know, you can see that just like their body is like transformed by this. And then they read them out loud, one by one. And so someone will say something like, "I'm afraid of never seeing my physical freedom." Another person will say, "I'm afraid of losing my child, and that's the thing that's like keeping me alive most." And the mother of my child knows this and is manipulating that connection to bring me to my knees. So many different great, just profound sufferings. Or like I don't know if I could ever face the family of the person that I killed. And they would share it, and I'd have them take a breath after each one, so they would like have time for it to settle in their body and settle in the room. And at the end, everyone was crying, and these are like tough guys. Everyone's crying, and they all, some of them would raise their hand and be like, you know, I didn't write that thing, but I have that too. And so those of you who are dealing with, you know, coming clean or dealing, you know, like, I feel you. And so it like brought out so much more than what they initially shared. And then the next step of the activity is to like try to examine a possible silver lining, to like get into that space of like, greatest wound is your greatest gift. So because this happened to you, what is now possible? And there's the one guy who was, his suffering was like, I don't know if I'll ever see my physical freedom. He was sentenced to life. He was like, I can't see a physical, I can't see a silver lining with that. And a student next to him, this young guy, was like, are you kidding, man? You're in college. It was a college course. It's like, you're in college. You have several degrees at this point. You counsel everyone on their legal matters. New guys that are coming in and coming out, they look at you as an example of what they could do, how they could use their time while they're in here. Like you're an example of how to like be human within this system. And to see that just like it just like erupted out of this guy of like how there's a silver lining, and to see the resonance between them.
Was he able to take? Was he able? He was able.
Yeah, he was totally like struck by it. It's like,
right. Ah. Wow.
Yeah, and like, just that happens so many times in that class, and it's just because there's opportunities to share those things that they didn't get to share, and especially things that they didn't get to share across all the various divisions within the prison, which are also, you know, just a microcosm of what's present in the world.
Absolutely.
But they could find these commonalities that we're both fathers, or you know, like at what age do you disclose to your kid that you're incarcerated? If at 1 year old, at 4 years old, like when is appropriate to like talk to each other about that? So beautiful, and they would turn to each other then like in the yard, or like you know, just like be a little kinder in the halls with each other, like being like, actually probably this guy is also a father, like I've had this thing open within myself, and so that I can like greet this other person with this degree of humanity. And it's not unique to the prison, right? Like as we talk about compassion or forgiveness, wherever we are, there's going to be those connections.
Right, but within the prison, in a place where safety to be anything,
right, to be in your full humanity.
Yeah,
like you never get that.
Yeah, so like the touch of freedom or whatever, I don't know what that would be for people of experience. Yeah, that invites. I can't think of anything more important to be doing than that. Right. Yeah. You know, in all the different systems that we're all you know, struggling with. But I think that story is such a beautiful one of the possibility, even within some of the most tightest, constricted, contracted systems. Yeah. And if it can happen there, right? Yeah. There's a lot of hope in a sense. Yeah. Around healing and connectivity.
Yeah, and it gave me like a huge faith in the teachings, like what you were saying earlier, of like it doesn't in some sense, it doesn't matter like who a teacher is or where they've come from, because they have the teachings and that's what they're offering, and there's a magic and a wisdom in that. Being inside in this like site that I've like organized around and been like in prison abolition movements for a long time, but it was like such a different thing to be inside and to try to create spaces of healing. And it was also like really, it was really tight. There wasn't a lot of room for it. There was no correction officers allowed in my classroom, but they'd be in the hallway, and they knock on the door at the end of the session for them to exit. And so we really just had those 3 hours together, and it was like really intensive, and then it was over. And then the next week we would have it again, but it was like
it's nice that it was 3 hours though.
Oh yeah,
that's a chunk.
Yeah, it was great. But it was a really stark contrast to like the rest of their experience. Of course.
Yeah. Which is so true with so much of healing. Yep. Even for the person who's working out, is starting to have flashbacks for the first time, or something starting to surface around trauma, and you have a job to go to,
right?
And you have kids, or and it's like, okay, so you go and you start to practice, or you start to see a therapist, and you have that 1 hour a week where the shit can just like, barely, and then you gotta keep doing your life. And I think that's one of the more I don't know. I mean, it's all right. Like we've created a little space now for healing where it's not totally illegal, and but I think if we can bring more of this consciousness into systems, into organizations, into communities or studios, where some of it can start to be absorbed and transformed and transmuted within communities, it's going to be a lot more efficient. And I think we probably will always need those places one-on-one, or there's, maybe some of those, specific times, but I think part of what we're going to have to do is really part of reframing healing, is reframing how we're doing it collectively, because there's so much still unprocessed on this planet, and this moment in history is we are never before in my lifetime is it in my face, like and I know as a white person that's a privilege, but okay, like all right, there's there's a much more profound wokeness that's happening for so many of my people and colleagues, and so I think this time is certainly a calling in a bigger way around healing in particular. I think we're probably like I don't know how much time we've gone on or whatever, but I kind of feel like maybe it might be time to start wrapping up.
Sure.
I don't know. I feel like we covered so much. I feel like, Jacoby, I want to tell y'all to go check out Jacoby's website. Your journey is so beautiful and inspiring. It was so great to read more about your background and kind of the places where you've been able to like touch wisdom and teaching and all those things. So I was like so inspired, and I feel like you're like this amazing resource that we have right now on the planet. And I mean, we all are. I don't mean it in this like weird way. I just mean like in an honoring way of thank you for all the things that you've done to heal and to learn and to grow and to teach, in all the ways that you have. I think it's just going to even get more exciting about, I think, what our generation's going to be able to offer in the generations after us, in so many of the things that we talked about. Anything else you would want to say to, in general, that you feel like is just really feels like something that...
I guess one of the like big lessons that my friend Lissa Gunlock, who's a Unitarian Universalist minister in LA, she and I talk about sometimes is like sometimes our frustration with our teachers, that like our teachers don't know everything, or like our teachers fuck up. Why do I have another teacher that fucks up in this way? Like why can't I find the one that's like does all the things and has all the language or like all the information or whatever. And it's come to me, and I think Alyssa and I have both realized together that like the greatest aspiration of any teacher, and I would hope this for myself too as a teacher, is for our students to know so much more than we do,
Mm-hmm.
and have access to so much more wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So then as they look back, they're always going to see that there's like something missing or something lacking or a spot that we didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that there's something wrong or bad with us, but it's just that like actually we need that student-teacher relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher needs it in order to like expand and grow as much as the student needs it. And so I've learned to be a little bit gentler on my teachers.
I love that piece of wisdom. That's like real helpful. Just that's part of the student's job is to illuminate those blind spots.
Yeah.
Which is and that's just sort of innate to perhaps
Yeah.
learning and teaching.
And also when I've like worked with college activists to be like, this is like maybe you're ready for this or maybe you're not, but like you're gonna see the holes, you're gonna see those spots, and that's part of the work you're doing, and it's not if you're expecting something else than that, like you're just gonna get disappointed over and over again.
That's good wisdom, for sure. Yeah, so relevant in so many systems that we're dealing with, and how frustrating and disappointing it can be, and then how that can also often take us out of those. Just sort of be like, I can't deal, right? Versus like
we give up.
Cultivating another like quality of resilience to figure out how to stay in a way that's like in integrity, but also is like in collaboration with the with the wisdom that's we're here to help lift up.
Right.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that piece a lot, actually, as somebody who's been a person who's had a lot of critique and a lot of systems, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. So, I want to thank you so much.
Thanks, Sage.
Yeah.
It's been so fun.
Oh, good. It has been so fun. I'm so happy to reconnect. I want to thank y'all for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
It'll be posted on the Hive directory, probably on Jacoby's page. And if you want to get in touch with Jacoby, your website is?
JacobyBallard.com.
And Bending Toward Justice is?
BendingTowardsJustice.com.
Cool.
And AdhikaraYogaSchool.com.
Mm-hmm. And Third Root in Brooklyn, check them out. Phenomenal. I'm looking forward to going there in a couple of weeks. Y'all, I hope you have a great night. Thanks for tuning in. We're still getting the tech things down, so thanks for bearing with us. Hopefully the sound was okay and the lighting. Come a little closer now. Love y'all. Have a good night.
Bye.